start with the top story, I think, in the news in Canada, at least. I'm going to play a clip. It's about 2 or 3 minutes long. Maybe I should wait here. There's Tuck Fruto is online. He's first in line to hand over my AR-15. Yeah, I'm sure you are there, Tuck Fruto. All right, let's go to the clip of Trudeau announcing what's going on with guns here, and we'll comment on it.
When it comes to keeping Canadians safe from gun violence, we need more than thoughts and prayers. We need concrete action. In 2019, we passed legislation to keep firearms out of the wrong hands, including by expanding background checks. Last year, we banned over 1,500 models of military-style assault weapons. And today, we're announcing new legislation for stronger measures than ever before to combat gun violence in Canada. Banning 1,500 models of assault-style weapons last year was a critical step, but we also need to continue to fight the illegal gun market. That's why we will increase criminal penalties for gun smuggling and trafficking and enhance the capacity of police and border officials to keep illegal firearms out of the country. We will move forward with the buyback program in the coming months and complete the prohibition to ensure these weapons cannot be legally used, transferred, transported, bequeathed, or sold. Getting these weapons off our streets and out of the hands of criminals means less violence. And that means safer cities and communities. As part of today's new legislation, we will also support municipalities to ban handguns through bylaws restricting their possession, storage, and transportation. We're backing up the cities with serious federal and criminal penalties to enforce these bylaws, including jail time for people who violate these municipal rules. Again, these are the strongest measures to fight gun violence our country has ever seen. We all know we'll be hearing from the well-funded gun lobby, and we all know there will be plenty of politics. But let's not forget what this is about: saving lives. We're not targeting law-abiding citizens who own guns to go hunting or for sport shooting. The measures we're proposing are concrete and practical, and they have one goal and one goal only: protecting you, your family, and your community.
Wow, do you guys feel protected? Mickey, as a gun owner, do you feel like he's protecting you and he's not targeting you?
I mean, if I was a gun owner, I certainly wouldn't feel protected, considering he more or less stated that legal gun owners are the ones trafficking them.
Right. There's a few troubling things here. First of all, the buyback thing. I don't know any self-respecting gun owner who's going to sell their weapons.
No. Unless maybe they're super high up for cash. That.
Yeah, and hold on, we're getting some rowdy comments already here. Yes, Peter, love the attitude there.
Enthusiasm.
Yeah, love the enthusiasm.
I think
the second thing, before you jump in, David, I want to say the other thing before I forget about it is this idea of not just allowing municipalities to ban guns, but using criminal law at the federal level to reinforce those bans and to line you up with a criminal record. So, it might be one thing for a municipality to say, look, no guns in city limits, but it's a completely other thing that to then say you got a criminal record for that. Anyways, David, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the one thing that stuck out the most to me out of his speech was the emphasis on saving lives, which I don't know if that's commonly the rhetoric about gun violence, but I think it's particularly potent now because we've just spent a year with people in Canada willingly giving up all of their freedoms to save lives. Right. So they're particularly receptive to this message now. Oh, well, yeah, I've inconvenienced myself so much to save lives. What kind of jerk wouldn't just give up a gun to save a life? Right. So I think even if it's the same message, it's going to be much more accepted by the Canadian population now than ever before. And the other thing that is interesting to me is he says that we're not going after legal gun owners who use it for hunting or sport. That's what he says. We're not against legal gun ownership as such. We're only fine with legal gun ownership for 2 reasons. And then it'll also be interesting to see how they end up defining sport, right?
Right.
Because if you own a handgun to shoot at the range, is that sport?
Yeah, no, it's not. And we already know that they're targeting sport shooters, right? So, for example, this assault style hand or rifle ban, which makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, it's simply a ban on a particular type of aesthetic, right? It's not banning a particular type of caliber or carbine or like the actual practicality of the gun. You can still get those kind of guns. They just can't look a certain way. They can't look offensive to the progressive eye. And these but a lot of these guns are used in sports shooting. Like there's a huge sports shooting community where people go and do these family-friendly events and they practice this, and these guns are already banned, so they're targeting it. And you know, I wanted to go through the video and splice in anytime he said we're taking measures to say we're using gun violence to stop gun violence, right? Where we're using gun violence to ban guns. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. But let's see.
The one credit I'll say is the point that made sense is if they do want to restrict like illegal imports of weapons, right? Like, because there is, I mean, I don't know that much about the laws and about what should be done with in that regard, but I do think it's that's the one thing that's like mildly acceptable to me is, okay, if there is sort of a mass influx of guns from the US, I don't know, but we would potentially want to monitor that. That's the one part I'll sort of give.
That's the conservative red meat, right? I mean, this is what defangs a lot of the conservative pushback, because conservatives have been pushing long and hard with the narrative that it's illegal guns that are coming across the border. We need to clamp down on the border. Well, you got what you wished for. Now Trudeau's doing the thing that you wanted. He's locking down the border, and he's going to up enforcement, and it's going to work about as well as the drug war is working, I suspect. And there's this narrative. I was thinking about this the other day because quite often one of the talking points from the gunny community is that, look, it's illegal owners that are doing this, that are causing crime. And the thought in my mind is, well, I guess the world we want is one where only legal gun owners are committing crimes, and because there is no legal gun owners or something like that. But I mean, it's a weird thing because it just goes to show the progressive mindset. They don't understand the nature of government, that it's a monopoly on violence, and that it uses gun violence to do everything it does. That undergirds everything. And so they say they're against gun violence, but they're calling for all sorts of institutionalized gun violence. What are your thoughts on that?
So, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the whole border control thing. It's way overdue because 98% of the homicides in Canada are caused by, illegally smuggled guns from the US. And these are handguns that you can break apart and literally shove in your waistband. No one can see them. Right. Legal guns are not the problem in Canada. No legal owner is carrying his guns, especially the restricted ones, because we have this arbitrary classification system. No one who has gone to the RCMP to be licensed is going to commit a crime with the gun that they licensed with the feds.
Yeah, that's fair. But I mean, look, the reality is, when you make gun ownership so hard and so onerous, you're going to increase the amount of people that are willing to take risks to get guns. And we see this with the drug war, right? They've clamped the harder they clamp down on drugs, the more the drug smugglers, and it goes to the most violent extremists, right? It becomes open a market for them to say, okay, well, here's an opportunity for me to get in. We have 3D printed guns now. I mean, you can't put the lid back on Pandora's box. So now what you've done is you've expanded, you've really limited the amount of legal ownership that there can be, and that by proxy expands the amount of illegal ownership, the amount of people that are going to go underground and in the shadows, just like the drug war, and they're going to be owning guns. And yeah, of course, the crimes are going to be committed. But my goal is to expand the legal market. Let people come out into the sunshine and buy guns and pack heat wherever they want. But
of course, it's
okay.
it's a massive industry, and if you look at the stats in the states where people can carry and do carry more often, crime is just lower. Because when criminals are afraid of would-be victims, those people are no longer going to be victims.
Right.
And one thing that I think is important to note, when they talk about we need to reduce gun violence, there's no discussion as to what are the root causes of gun violence, right? For example, drug dealers defending and enforcing their turf, or like there's so much illegal activity that needs to be defended with guns, also because they can't call the police. If someone steals their $1 million of cocaine, they need to defend themselves, right? And so whether or not people, like, we need to address why is there so much gun violence, and there are other ways we can reduce gun violence other than banning and taking people's guns.
Right. And I think it's a misnomer even to separate out gun violence from just violence. Okay, what is the cause of violent crime? Where does that come from? Well, government contributes to that. Well, sure. Yeah. Toxic masculinity. Yeah, well, I mean, it's government programs that largely contribute to this, right? So, we know that if you have a healthy family unit, you're less likely to be a criminal than if you come from a broken home and suffer child abuse and that sort of thing. And so, there's been a continuous war on the family, welfare programs, family law courts. All these things contribute to broken homes. They contribute to criminality. So the root of this problem is far removed from the proximal cause. I mean, the proximate cause, if you talk to a progressive, is the bullet coming out of the gun. We need to ban bullets. We need to ban guns because that's the problem. No, the problem is, where does this incentive to do violence in this psychological environment come from? And that comes from government programs. Not just government programs, but everything the government's doing is making the situation worse and creating these issues. So we need to get to the root cause. And I've said over and over again, a libertarian society where people take responsibility, where marriage is properly a private institution, where we get rid of this no-fault divorce crap, where it's a contract where if one person breaks it, they're on the hook. They can't just break it scot-free. And, all these policies that we promoted in the Libertarian Party, you'd see a much different Canada with much lower rates of violence.
So I want to address some of these questions we've gotten. So Chuck Fruto asks, what is the likelihood these gun bans become law? And if they do, what can be done to reverse it? I mean, right now, it seems like they'd probably become law. It's the Liberals and the NDP. I don't see how it wouldn't happen. I mean, a future conservative government could, in theory, reverse it, or a libertarian or rational government in the future could reverse them. But it's not. I mean, the trend in Canada is more and more and more and more statism, right? So I don't assume that they'll be reversed anytime soon. But at some point, maybe Canada will wake up, maybe Canadians will wake up, but I'm not particularly hopeful. And before you guys jump in on that, Luke Thompson also asks, or he says, bylaws are not laws, Trudeau. And I think Trudeau acknowledged that. He's saying that they're going to enforce the bylaws, so they will add laws federally to make these bylaws enforceable by the federal government and prison time. And I don't know if that's unprecedented or if they've done things like that before to add jail time for bylaw infractions and things like that. But that's definitely an interesting sort of. I've not heard of that before, but I don't know if I'm sort of.
It's new for me, and to talk about Tuck Fruto's point there of can we reverse this? Look, the state grows; it doesn't shrink. That's the reality. The only way to shrink the state is to have a culture that demands liberty or death, and
you need
that's
to
it.
Become ungovernable. You need to get off the reliance on the state. Like, it's as simple as what's illegal in the States now, like collecting rainwater or generating your own power. It's frowned upon. Like, our green energy solution is dependent on the government.
There's a political market demand for more government, and anytime anyone, including a right-wing populist, says we need the government to do X, they're contributing to the culture that is oppressing them. That's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
So they're advancing the culture of statism. All right, guys, we have a lot of ground to cover here. I just want to, I pulled up, sorry, David, it looks like you have something to say. Jump in, bud.
I wanted to reply to Patrick Anderson. He asked how the dating is going and what's with the nail polish. If you want to know more about the nail polish, there'll be an episode coming out soon where Tim and I discuss some discoveries of mine. Or you can head over to my YouTube channel.
Ooh, I can hardly wait
to learn more about it. And the dating is going okay. I have 2 females I'm currently interested in, or potentially interested in. So that's like way better than the past 2 years. So thanks for the.
Charlie, what's your status? Maybe you could be number 3. David needs to set a trap line and work it. Comment to me.
But yeah, so Tim, I'll keep monitoring the comments to see if there's any last threads. But bring us up to the next topic.
All right, here. I pulled out. I cut this down, but it's an old video I did that I think perfectly encapsulates the progressive mindset around gun control. So here you go, guys. It's about a minute long.
The reason there's so much gun violence today is because we don't have enough ultra-spiritual people with guns disarming other people with guns by threatening to shoot them with their guns. Think about this for a second. But guns aren't just good to use against gun owners, they're good to use against all sorts of other non-spiritual or downright evil people as well. Did you know that you can use guns to create things like universal health care and public schools? Who can be against health care and education? You take your gun and point the killing end at someone evil. You know, like someone who has more money than you do. Then you politely ask them for their money and say something like, "It's for a super spiritual feel-good reason, bro. So hand over your money and don't defend yourself or I'll shoot you." So remember, guns are bad, and anyone who stands in our way will be shot. Namaste.
That's what Trudeau reminds me of. Super
100%.
ultra spiritual gun control.
I saw it. I was impressed, but then I saw you made it years ago. It's 4 years old, that video.
Yeah, it's 4 years old. And I was like, oh man, this Trudeau's whole demeanor and the way he's, I don't know. It reminded me of that video. I did that actually as a response to JP Sears' video because he was talking about, he was taking the side of gun control back then. I think his politics have changed a little bit since then. All right, guys, I want to talk about cancel culture here a little bit. We've got Gina Carano, who was recently let go by Disney. Gina Carano, she was on The Mandalorian. I dug that show, and she made a tweet that was kind of comparing the plight of modern day conservatives to, I guess, Jews under the Nazi regime. Quite an exaggeration, a little bit hyperbolic. I get the point. What she was making was the point she was making was. Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say the point she was making is that, at that time, the Nazi regime turned the general citizenry against a certain type of people, the Jews, right? And it was those people who ratted them out, who oppressed them, as well as the regime. And so her point was that, the current administration, the current regime has turned people against people who have the wrong political opinions. And that was the point she was making. There is some truth to that, super hyperbolic, and, the Nazi things, Godwin's law, it's all overdone, but yeah. So, what are your thoughts? David, you're a Jew. What do you think about this?
I'm a Jew. So one, I think it's hilarious and great that Ben Shapiro is now working with her and funding her. I think that's awesome. Good for him. I think it's interesting because in Canada, at least, it's not actually as hyperbolic as it seems, right? People are reporting their neighbors because they're breaking these COVID restrictions and stuff. And I think the idea was the sentiment of it, right? Not saying it's literally the case, but it's the idea that, like, first you have to turn person against person, then no one says anything when the soldiers march through. It was something like that, right? Yeah, and I mean, I personally have made a similar Nazi comparison. When I was actually in Poland, I was at some museum talking about the Nazi occupation. or maybe I was in maybe Germany, but it was basically like I was thinking about it with respect to sort of the pronoun debate and the compelled speech, right? And there was this idea, there was this quote or story of, someone didn't do the Nazi salute and was arrested or questioned. And he was like, I didn't say anything. And they said, that's the problem. Like, you have to say things now, right? And so I made a comparison, like, yeah, it's not quite the same thing yet, but in principle, it's the same idea, right? And I also think the cancel culture is ridiculous, right? Like, how every conservative's been called a Nazi for the past 4 years, like explicitly, right? Donald Trump is king of the
now you're going to get
Nazis or
upset about a Nazi comparison when a conservative does it. Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's no issue at all, right? And so it's just totally absurd, right?
Right. And Mickey, before you jump in, I just wanted to riff on what David was saying there about how not what is it? Not coming out and actually speaking the establishment's politically correct narrative gets you in trouble now, because Chris Harrison from The Bachelor is taking a hiatus from the show right now. One of the contestants on The Bachelor apparently was photographed like 5 years ago in a high school graduation or university thing, dressed up in like a prom dress, going to something called an antebellum South party or something like that, which apparently has some bad racist overtones. It doesn't look like she knew anything about that at the time. I mean, she's on The Bachelor now, trying to win the affections of a black dude on there and become his wife. And this photo emerges, and of course, cancel culture immediately jumps on her. Now, here's
just
what got Chris.
She wants to marry a black guy doesn't mean she's not super racist against black guys, don't you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, of course. It's all internalized. I'm sure he's racist
even more than he hates him.
And of course, he'd be racist against himself with internalized racism if he found her the most attractive or whatever. But here's what got Chris Harrison canceled, essentially, and why he stepped away from the show. He was on I think ET Tonight or something like that, some show, and he was asked to comment on all the hate that this chick is getting on social media because of this picture that surfaced of her, and he basically said, look, let's give her a little grace. This was 5 years ago. We don't know where her mind was at. I want to suspend judgment until I actually hear from her what she has to say about it. I think that this search and destroy everyone for old posts is getting a little out of hand, and we need to extend some grace and kindness. That was essentially his message. And because of that, he's being accused of supporting racism and perpetuating it, and he's got to be canceled. Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
he's a Nazi.
That's the most common rhetoric, right?
Right.
As soon as you're labeled, one of that triple threat, homophobic, racist, whatever, like, you have no more platform. People will not listen to you because they have the preconception that you cannot have an open mind, when ironically, they're the ones not being able to listen to you. They can't hear an opposing idea without having an aneurysm.
There's some famous TikToker or like popular TikToker, only JS, because I like TikTok. And so she has like 10 million followers. She posted some video ranting about like men needing to support women who talk about how like not all men assault women, but like enough for women to be scared. And so she posted like an anti-man rant, and then she got shit on for like grouping all men together like this. And so she was like getting pressure from that. And then when she was like 16 or 17, she apparently called some black guy the N-word, and that surfaced. And so she's been getting canceled as well, which I think is really interesting, because in TikTok, you're seeing younger and younger people it's happening to, right? So now it's like 18, 19, 20-year-olds getting canceled for being stupid as 14, 15, 16-year-olds or whatever. And it's like at some point this will implode, because we're making our celebrities younger and younger and making higher and higher standards. It doesn't make any sense to me. It'll be very interesting to see when I plan on being famous, and I've said a lot of really dumb stuff. I've acted really inappropriately when I was younger. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens then.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. I mean, look, A lot of people have commented on this link prior to me putting it up, saying they had every right to fire Gina for whatever reason they want. That's anti-libertarian to say otherwise, and of course, they have every right to look, to me, Gina Carano wasn't a very good actor anyways, or actress. But I thought she was decent in the role. I'm an MMA fan. I've been a fan of Gina Carano from the MMA world, and I thought she was badass somewhat in the role, but yeah, her acting skills, not very great. But look, here's the thing. What's more interesting to me, because look, let's say libertarian is the right to cancel anyone from your property and your person. Basically, it's the right to absolutely discriminate for whatever reason you want, to keep people off your property and out of your person, including the government, by the way. But here's the question we should be asking: why is it that the free market only allows commies to be employed right now? Why is that? So let's look at some of the posts by some of the other people that work at Disney. Here's her co-star Pedro Pascal, doing Germany versus America. Okay, not another Nazi comparison. Here's a producer at Disney. That's a pretty vile tweet. I wouldn't blame Disney one bit for firing that guy.
And he's advocating murdering children. Is that
not inciting violence?
Murdering children, MAGA kids.
So there's a clear double standard here, and the point, and the thing that ought to interest libertarians isn't, on the one level, yeah, of course, whatever. If all you want to do is hire commies, that's your right as a free marketeer. Just let's not pretend this isn't going to go sideways eventually. But why is it that the market only wants commies in it? And the answer has everything to do with big government creating this culture, reinforcing media. It's all these oligopolies, these giant corporations that are in bed with government. Leftism and statism go hand in hand. Conservatives tend to want a smaller government, and the left wants a bigger government, more invasive government, and that serves these corporate interests, and it serves because they get to extort money from us vis-a-vis the state, and so of course the leftist culture is going to pervade in these markets.
I want to add in 2 points. Like, yes, Disney certainly has a right to fire whoever they want for whatever reason, but that doesn't mean it's intelligent or rational or good, right? Just because they have the right to do it doesn't mean they should do it. So that's first of all. We can say it was a bad move we're not statists, so we can say something was bad without it meaning we should force them to not be able to do it, right? And second, I agree that the root of the cause, or one of the roots, is statism, collectivism, and all of this stuff, but I don't as directly link it the way you do, Tim. The way I think of it, like, Disney is listening to the market as it is now. And so, yes, the market is totally distorted because of collectivism and statism and all of this bullshit. But it's more of a closed circuit than that typically, right? Most companies listen to Twitter. Most companies right now, all they do is listen to Twitter and other social media channels. And so I really think it's that. Like, this is what the culture wants. The culture is this distorted. And we have to understand, or at least it's what's getting magnified, right? Because that's sort of been the case since social media really took off, is what's being magnified and why. And you see it getting worse and worse. So if Disney didn't do this, they would have had to deal with a Twitter storm for a week or two until, the next thing distracts people, and they weren't willing to do it. But any company that does stand up, the people eventually shut up and move on, right? They're literally just screaming children, right? The world is being controlled right now by a bunch of 20 to 30-year-old whiny little bitches, right? But the companies are giving in, which is the issue.
Yeah, a lot of, everyone buys with emotion and then rationalizes their purchase with logic. So that's why we see so many companies pandering, because, for 1 month out of the year, they have their rainbow logo and then it goes right back out, to the storage. And it's like, we need to ask ourselves, if we need to celebrate all these people, why don't we do it all year round? Why are we having a specific month or a specific day for whatever creed, club, whatever you want to call it? Like, if we're all so equal and special, we should celebrate each other each day of the year.
Yeah, there's a lot of virtue signaling going on, but I think Jackie's question here demands an answer. And Jackie says, I get it that private companies should be able to do what they want, but isn't the problem that corporations are now becoming more powerful than governments? David,
So
I see you itching to take.
the most important thing is to clarify what you mean by power. So properly understood, corporations are not more powerful than governments. Governments have the right to use weapons. That is actual coercive power. The idea that there is, quote, economic power means is not even comparable, right? So to say corporations are more powerful than governments isn't true in my view. They have monetary power, economic power, but that shouldn't be conflated. And it's also hard to really, in terms of even economic power, if you want to call it that, the government right now is printing trillions of dollars in the US. I don't know how much. And so you can't really even compare it there. But so Jackie is now saying that power is influence over citizens. Right. But people are able to choose. A rational person, and the average person has the ability to be rational, even if they're not. They choose who they allow to influence them. That's not true when the government has a gun. So you can't, again, say that Disney's influence or Twitter's influence is akin to the state's influence. They're not comparable.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at it this way. The government can kill you, but a corporation, the most they can do is give you advertising to try to influence you to buy their stuff. And here's what happens. Here's the difference. If you try to start a company that competes with Google or Facebook, the government, there are so many cronyist regulations and ridiculous intellectual property regulations and all this whole regime that will prohibit you from doing it. Now, you could disobey that, but what's going to happen? Is Facebook going to come after you with guns? Is Google going to come after you with guns? No, the government is going to come with guns. If you disobey them, if you continue to try to compete and break all these cronyist regulations, they'll shoot you. That's the nature of government. Now, that's power to me that needs to be opposed. The power to be persuasive, I mean, that's... You can't point a gun at someone using persuasion. The most Facebook can do to you is boot you off the platform, which never existed 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. But government can put you in the ground and lock you in a cage. So that's a huge difference.
Colin James says that the pendulum has swung far to the left in recent years, cause and effect. It was opposite for years. It will rebalance eventually. I don't think left versus right is the proper view, and then maybe you would think the pendulum is swinging. It's freedom versus statism, right?
Of course.
And that has been, my understanding, a steady movement towards more and more statism, at least since the 60s, if not sooner. So it's a false view to say that.
It swings between left and right on the authoritarian spectrum, but it never seems to come back libertarian. Like, I do remember what he's talking about. Like, back in the 80s and 90s, it was the conservatives that were trying to ban all sorts of speech, and you know, they were the sanctimonious ones and the like prudes that didn't want verboten speech out there in the public and wanted to censor everything. And now it's the other side that's ultra religious nuts. The left it's a religion.
I want to add one more. Luke Thompson says the entertainment market is largely neutral. I totally disagree, right? Hollywood is openly left-wing. Conservative shows, conservative celebrities get canceled. I'm pretty sure every Silicon Valley is at least openly left-wing. I know that there are some companies and some founders and investors that are right-wing, but they wouldn't admit it, at least. Most of the Facebook, Twitter, Google, I'm pretty sure you can see the evidence of them being on the left. So I'm hard pressed to believe that the entertainment market is neutral.
If it was neutral, the guy that posted this would have been fired from Disney, right? I mean, this is far worse than Gina Carano's post, but he's on the left, so he gets away with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of protected speech, and then there's speech that will get you crucified in the media today. It's
yeah. But someone posted a good segue to the next little bit. There we go. Peter said, to the Proud Boys are a criminal organization. Now I want to join them, actually. Okay. So let's just play. I got a clip here of what the public safety minister in Canada has to say.
Yes, thank you. Minister, firstly, did the Proud Boys or any of the other groups you've listed today pose a current serious security threat to Canada?
Thank you very much, David, for the question. And frankly, that's, I would say absolutely yes. And that's precisely why we have included them as a terrorist entity on our listings under the criminal code. There has been a growing body of evidence collected here in Canada and among our international partners, particularly in the United States, of the escalation of violence that this group has been involved in. It is deeply concerning, and you know, although we've been monitoring the activities of this group with considerable concern since 2018, we've seen most recently, and there is a great deal of evidence to support that there has been a serious and concerning escalation of violent, not just rhetoric, but activity and planning, and that's why we have responded as we have today.
Which is why I gave no specifics whatsoever.
Right. So here we have Proud Boy. Now, Proud Boys was started by Gavin McInnes as essentially a drinking group that described themselves as Western chauvinists. You know, they got tired of constantly saying, you know, having, I guess, essentially liberal ideas, right? Like the idea of the individual, of freedom, of free markets, of property rights, of having that being demonized and say, no, we got to be proud of this. We should be chauvinists about this and say this is the best way. It's way better than all the other ways being. And let's wear our colors on our sleeves. So they dress up in these polo shirts and kind of, you know, whatever. A drinking group. Now they're being, and from as far as I know, they've got 0 deaths on their hands compared to, say, Antifa or these other groups that are completely accepted.
There's an alphabet soup that was burning a lot of businesses over the summer, but they're not a terrorist organization.
Right. Yeah. So, BLM was inciting riots and burning down cities. And, they're not a terrorist group, but Proud Boys, a drinking group. Now, there were certainly some Proud Boys in the January 6th storming of the Capitol or whatever, I think. And that's, I think, where a lot of the impetus for this is coming from. The excuse is coming from to label them as such. But I mean, to me, that's kind of like saying, okay, the guy with the horns is a member of the Water Buffaloes, and the Water Buffaloes is therefore a terrorist organization. There was probably some Republicans and Democrats in that crowd as well. Are those terrorist organizations because a couple of their members went off the rails? What are your guys' thoughts on this?
I'd be really interested to know who else was else was added to this list around the same time, or who else is on this list. What comes to mind is actually an article by Ayn Rand called Extremism or the Art of Smearing. And so it's a really interesting article about the concept extremism. And it talks about the John Birch Society and how I don't remember, the 60s or 70s, they were like grouped in with the Ku Klux Klan and the Communist Party as like an evil group, when they were just sort of like a milquetoast conservative group. And the whole idea was to just delegitimize any sort of right thought at all, right? And so I don't know much about the Proud Boys. I know very little about them, but that's what comes to mind for me is we need to delegitimize any sort of group who's associated with the right wing. And you know, so even if you step one step to the left or one step to the right and join a group, then you're evil, then you're a terrorist or whatever it is. And that really gets into people's minds, because if they're like me and they've never heard of the Proud Boys, and the first thing they've ever heard is, oh, this is on this list, they're not going to think about it. When someone says Proud Boys, oh, they're terrorists, right? When someone says John Birch Society, oh, they're extremists. They're just like the Ku Klux Klan. And this is how powerful the messaging can be. And so that's sort of what comes to mind for me.
Right. So it stops conversations from even happening in the first place. Because if you can understand something fully, you can't hate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and look,
I can really hate
certain things. Yeah. But once you
harder,
like, because when someone believes in something, they think they're right. And if you completely understand where they're coming from, you could at least partially understand why they're doing what they're doing and how they formulated the opinion that what I'm doing is righteous or just.
Mm-hmm.
In most cases, not very extremes, of course.
Yeah. But the whole idea is, they don't want nuanced thought, right? They want people to immediately need to group anyone like slightly different into that most extreme case, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and look, I've met some Proud Boys in the past. I went to a Jordan Peterson event, and there was a meetup at the pub afterwards, and there was some guys wearing the shirts, and I started chatting with these guys, and they were just, they just seemed like guys that were tired of Antifa and leftists continually breaking into these rallies and disrupting them, and they part of their mission, it seemed like, was to provide maybe a little bit of security and help keep these people out or something like that, which, that's a dangerous game to play for sure, because it ends like this, right? The left can show all sorts of violence, but the right, if you show any, you have to be super careful whenever you're pushing back. Because you will be demonized and held in the worst light. But here, you asked what terrorist entities were added to the list. I've got it right here. There's Atomwaffen Division, which sounds pretty neo-Nazi, I guess. The Base.
They are Nazis, yeah.
The Proud Boys and Russian Imperial Movement. And the Proud Boys was added also to a list. They also added 3 Al-Qaeda affiliates, 5 Daesh affiliates, Hizbul Mujahideen. So all these extremely violent, radical Islamists who are out to destroy Western civilization, the Proud Boys was added to that list. That seems a little bit like they don't quite belong together.
So
one of these things is not like the other.
I would definitely encourage people to read that article by Ayn Rand. It's extremely fascinating, and it gets in sort of like the deepest reasons as to why people try and do something like this. You also brought up a good point about Jordan Peterson, right? Because the point isn't just to delegitimize the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys, some of them go to Jordan Peterson lectures. Oh, now he's associated with a terrorist group. Jordan Peterson doesn't disavow 5 terrorists in his audience. That's the next headline, right? That's how it builds and grows. So anyone who is associated with this group is now not just a Nazi. They're a literal terrorist, right?
And David, that is a perfect segue into the next video clip, which kind of foreshadows, I think, where we're going. So watch this, guys.
Are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of a country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians. And unfortunately,
wow, that's nuts.
Wait, did he just group in fascists, racists with libertarians?
And authoritarians and
insurgents and racists and bigots and fascists and it's the same thing, right? We need to just delegitimize everyone who disagrees and put them all in the same category of the bad guys, the extremists, right? That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And we have Brandon Kirby just joining us from Being Libertarian. Thanks for joining us, Brandon. You're Brandon. Catching the tail end. We're just talking, Brandon, about cancel culture and the direction it seems to be heading. They've come for the Proud Boys, and it seems like they're not far away from going after libertarians. And it won't be long before the Libertarian Party of Canada might be designated as a terrorist organization.
Well, you're definitely treasonous.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Say hello to the bad guy. Sorry for my tardiness. Academia beckoned, but I'm here now. So what are you terrorists talking about? Cancel culture and whether or not, I don't get that. Like, here we are saying, please don't bomb people. Please don't hurt anybody. And all of a sudden we're the terrorists. Like, where does that come from?
Don't use gun violence to get things done in society. That's our whole shtick.
I find it really interesting that the guy in the video grouped us in with, extremists in the Middle East who are funded and armed by the U.S.
Yeah, they're literally
That's
funded by the
incredibly
U.S. government.
ironic that, he talked about the supposed division and germination of these communities, but they're funded by the U.S. government. Like, he's
Right.
owning up to divide and conquer without owning up to it.
Well, I think
Well,
it has to be.
and look, let's talk about the definition of terrorist for a sec. I mean, it from what I understand, it is instilling fear in people through threats of violence or outright violence, right? I mean, that's a perfect definition of our government right now.
For a political goal.
Yeah, for a political goal. And so we've got nonstop fear mongering about one hobgoblin after another. For the last year, it's been COVID and how we're going to kill grannies and how we got to protect the grannies and how we need to use violence to protect the grannies and we need to lock people down. We need to quarantine them in hotels. When they come back from the U.S., David, you're going to be locked down and you're going to have to spend $3,000 isolating on your own dime, or you'll be thrown in a cage. One violent threat after another. I mean, is the irony of this organization of terrorists calling the Proud Boys, who are a drinking club who talk about how great Western civilization is, terrorists is unbelievable. Anyways.
Well, there's a wide spread financing of terrorism that's permeating throughout our culture. I mean, in the AML world, 50% of what we do is counter-financing of terrorism. And I can tell you, you have organizations like Saudi Aramco. I don't live that far from the St. John refinery, which is the largest oil refinery in Canada. And it's Saudi Arabian oil. And that money, we know they've been blacklisted several times, is going to fund terrorism. I mean, you're funding terrorism by filling up the tank of gas in your car. Like, it's not okay. I mean, there's things that we could do, especially that are pro-Alberta, just use Canadian oil. But there's so much financing of terrorism that's going on all around the world that we just turn a blind eye to. Now, all of a sudden, libertarians who just say leave people alone, now we're the terrorists? Like, it's so ridiculous. It's so non-nuanced. They're attaching this with the most superficial attack tactics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what do you say?
Never mind what the Saudis are doing in Yemen, which is never reported on the news because, as a ally of the great United States, they can't be put out in the news as they are, which is, they're waging a genocide.
Yeah,
Just like
the U.S. administration is supporting a genocide, and a lot of Canadian weapons are being used in that as well. Yeah, but yet if
we're
we
the terrorists,
if
we stop committing genocide, that would be nice.
We're not allowed to own the property that they're using to help and fund terrorism. Makes sense.
Yeah.
How does that go for gun control too? Because worst gun control policy ever. You remember the shooting in Orlando, where you had the shooter in the gay nightclub and he killed 49-50 folks. Imagine if the police showed up and they took the shooter's side. Well, there is Saudi Arabia. We're giving guns to Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, we're saying no to law-abiding, peaceful Canadian citizens having guns. Like, this is the worst gun control policy I could possibly design.
Yeah, we actually opened up the show talking about the latest round of gun ban proposals from the Trudeau government, where it's going to be a buyback program. It's going to be supporting criminal law against people who break municipal rules around handgun ownership and that sort of thing. But one of the things Mickey and I were talking about earlier was maybe organizing some sort of pushback gun rally at Ottawa. My idea was to bring a bunch of Nerf guns, to have all the protesters bring very colorful Nerf guns to this thing. Maybe we can have a Nerf fight or something like that.
Love it.
As part of the demonstration. Just to highlight how harmless law-abiding gun owners are and how stupid these bans are. But what are your thoughts on that, guys? Is there any way we can jazz that up or make it into a spectacle?
I like that. I like the idea of the Nerf gun protest, but I'm interested to know how many times you'd have to shoot a cop with a Nerf gun before he shoots you with a bullet.
Well,
would be
as soon as he
an
sees you, he's
empirical
probably going to light you up. So
Right.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
because there'll be a Proud Boy, so they'll know that we're terrorists.
obviously,
Okay, boys, fill me in here. What are the Proud Boys? You have to forgive my ignorance on some issues, and I'm just not up to date on the latest gossip. What are the Proud Boys?
The Proud Boys was essentially a drinking group that was Gavin McInnes's brainchild. Gavin McInnes was one of the co-founders of Vice back in the day, who kind of went. He was with Rebel Media. Now he does his own thing. He started the Proud Boys essentially as a pushback against leftism. Just say, look, we can be proud of our culture, of Western civilization, of the principles that undergird it, of individualism and all this. We can say the West is the best. We can be proud Western chauvinists, and we can drink beer, and we can, get together. And, there's some kind of weird things that it evolved into, where there's like jumping in ceremonies, kind of like gangs, where someone kind of gets lightly beaten or something like that if they want to join or go up to the next level. Like there's these maternity or fraternities have kind of weird initiation rituals.
Hey, I'm a Mason. I know what it's about.
Fraternities have way worse initiation rituals.
Way worse. Yeah,
but that is a little weird. You got to admit.
Like I come from the fire department. We have our own initiation rituals, although leftist corporate culture is kind of putting a damper on that, which is unfortunate because some of the hazing that goes on, that's good natured, that's designed to test probies and to build them up and to give them some resistance to overcome.
Like what? Like what would you guys do back in the day before the leftist overtake of corporate culture? What's some of the razzing that you guys would do?
Sure. Well, we do things like have them sit up in the hose tower, at the top of the hose tower all night, watching for fires. We called it Fire Watch. We said you got to watch the town for fires. Stay up there. Make sure you don't nod off, because this is a super important job. Stay up there. Watch the town for fires. Right. We dunk them with water all the time. We get them to do things like we have these circular saws, K12 saws. Those big saws you see on TV where they cut through cars and walls and stuff. We tell them that you can push start these things, and sometimes you have to push start them in an emergency when the pull handle breaks or something like that. So we get them to run down the tarmac trying to push start these things. Of course, you can't push start them. We'd videotape them and put it on there, right? And we just up the pressure on them, like constantly be testing them and pushing them on the job as well, making them do extra training evolutions, like you're not going fast enough, Proby, pick up the pace, things that you got to meet our standard, right? And this is just like, and of course you're scrubbing toilets with a toothbrush, and you're doing all the extra duties, and you're bringing in supper and cooking it, and you're like you're working 10 times harder than everyone else to prove yourself, right? And you're not allowed to sit on the leathers until you passed your probationary period. Like all these rules about what you can't do. You're treated like an underclass citizen until you prove yourself. And boy, terrible. You work hard, but I tell you, you feel good when you get past that first year and you've stood up to the pressure, you've held your head high, you haven't caved in, and sometimes, guess what? Probies will not be able to hack the pressure, and they'll kind of crumble, and they'll get upset, and they'll go, and then an older guy will take them aside and go, look, this happens to everyone. Okay, here's how you deal with it. And they teach them tools to build up their character and build up their resilience so that they know how to deal with that pressure. Because look, when we go into a fire, we have to know that person, we have to be able to trust that person isn't going to crumble under the stress of it, right? And if they can't handle a little hazing during that time, how are they going to have our backs when push comes to shove and the stakes are real? And so that's the purpose of hazing. And so I think a lot of fraternities have elements of that, because that's how guys bond. That's how they instill trust in each other.
Exactly.
Can you take this? Can you stand this? Right.
I gotta head out, guys. This has been fun.
All right, David.
I got another recording, but I'll see you guys soon. Thanks, everyone.
David's got a hot date. He's lying.
Yeah. They do the same thing in the Freemasonry, and I'll tell you, this really has an interplay with cancel culture, because your muscles only build strength by facing resistance. Your mind only grows because it's overcome things it previously couldn't comprehend. Your soul only gains strength by encountering things that are evil. If
Right.
you live a life of abstract luxury, you probably are not that spiritually strong. And so with cancel culture, oh, well, I can't be exposed to the slightest thing that would be in opposition to the way I like to live my life or the things that I believe.
So.
I can't be exposed to this. I can't be exposed to that. And if you've never faced that sort of resistance, then you're quite weak.
Yeah, well, and look, what we're talking about here, this idea of meeting resistance, is the opposite of cancel culture, right? It is
Exactly.
that, look, we need to be able to face criticism. We need to be able to face adversity. We need to be, this is kind of a positive masculine trait, right? This is how men build up resilience and the ability to handle, and women too. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely ingrained in a man. If your job as a man, or if you see your job as to provide for your family, to protect your boundaries, the boundaries of your family. You know, when I go out with my family, my head's on a swivel and my family's on the inside lane, right, of the sidewalk. I'm on the outside. I'm the guy that's taking responsibility for protecting them. Okay. Now, if you're stepping into that role, you better be able to handle stuff that's coming at you. And if you want to be able to handle stuff that's coming at you, you better have put yourself through some hardship, against some resistance. You go in that gym and you lift weights and you strain and you stress, and that builds you up stronger. And you do that with mental resilience as well in these fraternities, whether it's a fire department or a fraternity that you're joining. That's all part of it, is developing your character. And so, but the opposite of that is victim culture, where you constantly see yourself as a victim and incapable of having any agency whatsoever, because you're totally at the whim of these external forces that you can have no control over. So you have to control all the external forces, because your feelings might get hurt, or you might, have someone else work a little bit harder than you think you should.
It's a lack of personal responsibility. And, the whole hazing thing, like, that's not too different. Well, obviously yours is a little bit different, but the general idea isn't too different from, having a brother and growing up with them, because you're going to fight, you're going to steal each other's shit. Like, it's boys being boys. Not too long ago, that's all it was. Now there is an attack on manhood, You can't be a man because that's toxic now. Like, how are we ever going to, protect our future kids and stuff if nobody's, willing to do it?
No, absolutely right. And we see that culture pervading. I would certainly see it pervading the fire service, where, it's safety first. Back in my day, it was safety third or fourth, maybe. It was like, get the job done and do what you need to do.
Exactly. You're there to save lives.
Yeah. And now everything is like, we can't get it's crazy. I saw an article a few years ago about how some San Francisco firefighters stood on the beach and watched a guy drown in chest deep water because they didn't have the certifications required to go in and save him, and their department policy wouldn't let them go in without the certifications. So they were rightfully scared of losing their job if they tried to save this guy. So they basically watched this guy with mental illness drown, right? And that's kind of the culture that's pervading everything right now. It's a sad state of affairs. And it used to be too, like, I remember when I first started in EMS, you'd go to a gory call and it would shake you up, and it would be like, holy crap. And the older guys, that your mentors, would be making really dark jokes about it. One guy afterwards would take me aside afterwards and said, look, I know that some of the stuff we're saying is shocking and very inappropriate if anyone else were to hear it, but this is how we distance ourselves from those calls. This is how we clinically detach.
You got to find your own way to cope, right?
Right. And they said, look, you need to cultivate clinical detachment, and look at this as a problem to be solved. Because if you start to get immersed in that call and let it affect you and become so empathetic that you're taking on that person's trauma, you will be useless to them. Imagine a surgeon having complete empathy for a patient that they're about to cut into and flinching as soon as that scalpel touches the skin. They have to essentially become detached sociopaths to be effective at their job, or have what you might call rational compassion, right? Like the understanding that clinical detachment, that ability to manage your emotions and separate look at this person as a problem to be solved is the best thing for that person and for you. And we've lost that now in emergency services, where as soon as we go on gory calls or anything, we definitely can't have dark humor anymore, because that might trigger someone. We can't take someone aside and tell them this is, no, absolutely not, right? Because you could trigger someone, right? And now we're taught that we're supposed to have PTSD or mental illness every time, like our job is a challenge to us. Well, when I was coming up in it, we were taught that our job is going to make us more mentally resilient. Like, you're going to see the worst parts of humanity possible, and you're going to have the skills and the tools to overcome it and to restore order to chaos through all that adversity with your band of brothers. And that gives you the sense of competence and confidence and resilience and anti-fragility. And now you're taught that, these calls are all supposed to break you down and make you into a simpering mess. And of course that is true. I mean, it's no coincidence that we see skyrocketing rates of suicide and depression and PTSD in emergency services. At the same time, we've never had more resources in terms of what we bring to a call, and more resources in terms of mental health supports at the same time. It's because this mental health industrial complex thrives on creating victims, and that's how it perpetuates. And we see this through all levels and all layers of society, and that's where cancel culture comes from.
And the worst way to overcome adversity is to inculcate the sense of victimization.
Yeah,
I mean, you just don't overcome it at that point. It's the same thing. I mean, I worked in the bank, and I could tell you stories. Probably wouldn't be as gory as what you're talking about, but it's just a level of evil and heinousness that you cannot comprehend unless you're within that sphere, unless you're within that field, and then you start to joke about things that are the darkest things possible. But that's how you cope, because if you actually allowed some of the things to get to you, then you just couldn't do the job. You would lose productivity. I mean, your coping mechanism was your ability to joke about these things and laugh it off, the most horrific things possible. But you learn to detach yourself, because without those calluses, then you can't perform the job. Right. I mean, everybody needs a certain callousness to do that.
Yeah, and part of me thinks that what we need to do is take the Petersonian approach here and stop begging for our liberty, and because we can't really control that. Like, we can't control what Trudeau and what the government's going to do, but what we can control, what we can give me more freedom in my life right now, is taking on more responsibility. Doing more workouts, reading more books, cleaning my room. Those are all things I can do to increase my personal freedom. So discipline equals freedom. And maybe as libertarians, we need to be talking about the responsibility we can take on as individuals that will increase our freedom.
There's a huge overarching withdrawal from personal responsibility in our society, because nobody, and it's personified in this gun bill. It's, oh, we need to be saved from X thing. It's like, no, we could provide ourselves with the protection, but instead we're taking it away. Why are we only making criminals have guns? Yeah, whether it be government or gangbangers.
We should do a whole podcast on what it's like to live as a libertarian, how you can liberate yourself, especially with respect to internet search engines like DuckDuckGo and Tor browser, with your investments, in terms of how you don't have to be stolen from if you invest in the right ways. Gun protection.
Definitely use a VPN.
Yeah. There's so many things that you can do financially, technologically wise. There's so many things that you can do to liberate yourself within the culture that we are placed in. Because Tim, it's as you say, we don't really have any control over Trudeau, but we have control over ourselves.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, I have to go make my bed. So.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to have to wrap this up pretty soon. But Giselle asked me to elaborate, I'm guessing, on the taking responsibility bit. And Giselle, what I mean by that is, look, if you make yourself into a stronger person, you have more freedom. Okay, if you're stronger physically, you can lift more, you can do more things, you can run up more stairs, you can spend more time with your children. You have more choices available to you. If you read more books, if you fill your head with knowledge, you have more individual freedom to overcome the propaganda and marketing that these giant corporations are throwing at you constantly. If you are able to think rationally, if you understand how to build up your own personal wealth, and Brandon is an investment advisor, and a lot of us are into cryptocurrency and precious metals because we've educated ourselves on macroeconomics. We understand how everything is built on this house of cards central banking system, this Ponzi scheme of fake money, and how eventually it's going to collapse. And there are ways to actually come out ahead even when the economy collapses, and you have to know what to do. And so the way you do this and you come out ahead even when the world goes to hell, and even when the apocalypse comes, as you see it coming, you prepare yourself, you build yourself up stronger, and that's something you can do tangibly in your life right now. You can go on a diet, you can improve your nutrition, you can improve your physical strength, you can do all these things, and like Jocko Willink says, discipline equals freedom. If you have a routine every day that makes you stronger, that you can just put on autopilot so that you don't even have to think about these rituals that you do every day. You wake up with an attitude of gratitude, you go for a run, you read a book, you do some journaling, you write some content, you whatever it is that all that will make you add a little bit more freedom and a little bit more freedom, a little bit more freedom. And over time, you'll become powerful in your own life, and the government will have less sway over you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean by that.
Bouncing off what you said about education, it's like, as anyone with a device has access to the world's largest information center of collated data to ever exist. We have basically every single written thing in human history available in one place, and that's the internet. So you can learn how to, be a tradesman. In theory, you can learn how to make firearms. That's how I learned most of my knowledge. The internet got me into firearms and how they operate and how to use them safely. And then I went out.
You can learn
and
how
did
to
those
grow
things.
food. Yeah, you can learn how to grow your own food. You can learn how to invest. All these things.
I've learned how to make different, wine, whiskeys, how to grow potatoes. It's, knowledge is power, and you have all of human knowledge available to you in this day and age.
Absolutely.
We've got to do a whole podcast on just basic day-to-day practical living as a libertarian.
Yeah. And Giselle, I would encourage you to listen to my podcast, The Liberty Experts. I do it with David, and we do a lot of talking about personal responsibility, things that we're doing in our own life and things that you can do in your life to actually increase your personal liberty. Because I've recognized it's one thing to constantly talk about rights and criticize the government and talk about all the terrible evil that they're doing. But the reality is we're not making a dent in that. It's very difficult to, but we can make a dent in our own lives, a huge dent, and be happier and more prosperous. But guys, let's call it there. It's been a great live stream. We've covered a lot of ground. We do these live streams at least once a month. So make sure you come to our Facebook page, The Liberty Experts, and follow us, follow the page, and you'll see when the live streams are posted. You'll see all our new podcasts. We put out 2 podcasts a week talking about a lot of this personal responsibility stuff, as well as a lot of stuff going on in culture and the evil things the government's doing as well. So check us out there. You become a supporting listener at thelibertyexperts.com as well. And if you're a supporting listener, you can actually come on this show like Mickey and Brandon here and be a panelist and chat with us, or have a private conversation with me or David. So we appreciate all of you. Mickey, Brandon, thanks so much for joining us on short notice, and great convo, guys. Where can people follow you guys?
Well, I just help run the Libertarian Party Twitter account, so at Libertarian CDN.
That's been fire lately, by the way. I'm loving what you're doing there. So
yeah, just trying to keep putting out the truth, and as soon as we stop telling the truth, we die in darkness.
Well
to
said.
Steal the Washington Post's slogan.
Yeah, Brandon.
Being Libertarian Canada.
Being Libertarian Canada. Yeah, they've got some great stuff.
largest libertarian blog in all of Canada. So you follow it, and occasionally we put out some crap, and I'm trying to get rid of the losers that are putting out a whole bunch of crap. But for the most part, it's A+ libertarian content. I'm the one who usually puts out the crap, actually, now that I think about it.
Awesome.
Don't put
awesome,
down.
guys. And to the audience, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next month. Make sure you like and subscribe our page. Thanks, guys.